Learning outcomes. By the end of this, you should be able to define a learning outcome, describe what makes a good learning outcome, and create learning outcomes for your first lesson. What is a learning outcome? Learning outcomes provide a framework for a lesson. Every instructor should start their lesson planning with learning outcomes, and every class should start with the instructor sharing these learning outcomes with students. A learning outcome is a statement describing the skills, values, knowledge, or abilities a student should be able to demonstrate upon the end of a course or class. Learning outcomes are a good way to keep things student-centered, and the way it is phrased, by the end of today's class, students should be able to, places responsibility on the students to achieve these goals, which makes them more active in the learning process. So where do we get our course learning outcomes? We arrive at our course learning outcomes by getting input from industry, students, and our instructors. If something is changed in industry, we adapt our curriculum to meet these changes so that students are up to date on their learning and can meet industry demands when they graduate. So based on this feedback, we get broader course goals and course outcomes. This is what instructors should get from their programs before starting classes. The instructor then takes the broader course outcomes and breaks them down into learning outcomes for each of the lessons that make up the course. Teaching strategies and goals are then decided upon based on these more specific learning outcomes. So why use learning outcomes? Sometimes new instructors come to class with a question, what will I teach my students today? But just because you think you're going to teach your students something doesn't mean that they're going to learn it. By starting with learning outcomes, you are looking at the goals that students need to achieve by the end of your class and how you can help them get there. This is a more efficient way of planning your time with the students. Also, coming from industry, VFS instructors have so much knowledge and passion about the subject they teach, it's easy to go off topic, and learning outcomes are a good way to avoid this. Here are some other reasons why learning outcomes are vital to preparing for a class. They clearly communicate expectations. They increase student engagement and commitment. They enhance project criteria and evaluation. They enable effective lesson planning. They help with time management and classroom management. They provide graduates with the skills employers are looking for. And most importantly, it makes your jobs easier. Some of you may be familiar with this acronym, and this also applies to learning outcomes. It is very important to make sure that learning outcomes are measurable so that there is some way of assessing achievement of these outcomes at the end of a lesson or series of lessons. Let's look at some examples of learning outcomes. What do you think of these? By the end of today's class, students should be able to use or gain a better understanding of Unity, Nuke, Maya, Photoshop, or Premiere. Students should be able to use Breath to support acting. Students should be able to use layer masks and vector masks in Photoshop. Students should be able to set up a camera. Students should be able to use Unity to make a character jump over an obstacle. Students should be able to apply the principles of animation in making a bouncing ball using Maya. Students should be able to perform a 2-minute monologue in the manner of a character from The Great Gatsby. These outcomes get better as you go down the list. The last 3 examples are the best ones because they are specific and measurable. The first 2 are too vague to be learning outcomes for one lesson. So how does learning outcomes make your life easier as an instructor? Please share some of the learning outcomes you've come up with in the discussion forum. If you have any questions or comments, please share these in the discussion forum as well. Thanks for watching.